Hey everyone, it's Allie, and I'm either going to get a lot of people that are going to hate me for making this video, or a lot of people that are going to thank me for doing it instead. Today we're going to be doing two guides in one. We're going to be talking about how to profit craft Elemental Claws, and at the same time, it's going to serve as a crafting guide for the people who just want to make their own to massively save on the cost of getting one of these, as people are going to massively overprice them on trade compared to the cost of crafting them yourself. So you can either do this passively on the side, as Lightning Strike is going to be a very popular build this season to make a little bit of extra money, or you can just use this as a way to just make your own upgrade instead of buying one from trade. To begin this, we need to select the base for a claw. Now, most people are going to go for Imperial Claws, as that is going to be the single best base to choose, but a nice alternative to it is going to specifically be a Noble Claw. The only difference between these two bases is that the physical damage is a little bit lower, which we completely do not care about in a Trinity Lightning Strike build, as it is completely irrelevant to us. It makes no difference in your damage. And the implicit is going to be 40 life gain on hit instead of 46. This 6 extra life is straight up irrelevant, and you will literally never notice the difference. So please don't fall for the bait of going for an Imperial Claw. Unless you're profit crafting these, then profit craft Imperial Claws. But if you're crafting one of these for yourself, then you could also just choose a Noble Claw instead. Another good alternative is to potentially do this on a Twin Claw or a Gemini Claw, as they're pretty close in terms of power to an Imperial Claw. The only downside being their attack speed is going to be 0.1 lower, which is going to make your build feel a little bit slower than if you were to use an Imperial Noble. But they're also decent bases if you can find yourself a cheap starting item. In terms of what we're going to be looking for on these claws to begin, and there will be a trade link for this in the description below, is just going to be a fractured elemental prefix. We're either going to look for fractured fire damage, cold damage, or lane damage, and it's completely irrelevant which one you get of the three, as they're all going to be exactly the same thing. Depending on your budget, this is going to be where you're either going to want to look for a tier 1 roll or a tier 2 roll or a tier 3 roll. It really does not matter, as the majority of the power in this claw is going to come from everything except the fracture. Settling for something like a tier 3 fractured roll or a tier 4 fractured roll is completely fine. It's only going to be a few percent DPS weaker than if you got yourself something like tier 2 or higher. I ideally recommend to try and get yourself a tier 2 or higher roll, as that is going to feel really strong. But again, honestly, it does not matter too much. So once we do have our claw, and for all the examples that we're going to be doing in this video, I'm going to be using a fractured cold damage claw as my base. The first step is going to be to go and buy ourselves some essences. You're either going to want to use Wrath, Hatred, or Anger essences based off of which is going to be the cheapest. In the case of my cold claw, because it already has cold damage on it, we can't use Hatred. So we're going to either look at the prices of Wrath or Anger essences and see which ones are cheaper. You can either get yourself Deafening, or you can get yourself Shrieking if you're on a little bit of a lower budget. And either are completely fine, as once you have the base, you can honestly just recraft this claw at any time for fairly cheap. What we're then going to do as our first step is to get all 3 added damage prefixes on there. In this case, we'd already have fractured cold damage, so we wouldn't have to roll for that. And then in my case, let's say Anger were cheaper. We would then use Anger essences to roll on our claw until we hit added lightning damage. Now, these rolls are going to get harder and harder to hit the further down you go in terms of tiers. And I wouldn't settle for anything other than a tier 3 or a tier 2 roll. On League launch, I would never recommend trying to go for tier 1, as it's going to cost divs and divs and divs to hit, with a tier 3 roll being a 1 in 57, making it fairly easy to go for, while a tier 2 or higher roll is going to be a 1 in 160. This is going to simply be based on a judgment call you're going to have to make based on the prices and what you can afford and what is within your budget. But all we're going to be doing is just spam essences onto the claw until we eventually get ourselves a claw that's going to look something like this. We are going to have a essence added damage modifier on there, and then we're going to be getting ourselves our other prefix. In the end, you'll have a claw that has all 3 of them on it like this. And to finish off our starter claw, all we then need to do from here is simply just craft attack speed on the crafting bench to finish it off. If you cannot craft attack speed on this claw, I would not use it in my opinion, as it's just going to feel very, very weak, and it's going to feel kind of miserable not having 1.2 base APS on your claw. And if you end up having a bunch of random garbage suffixes on there, maybe something like this, you will have to use an Orb of Annul to hopefully remove a suffix off of your claw without it touching a prefix. If it ends up instead annulling a prefix instead of a suffix, you would have to go back to step 1 and recraft the prefixes with essences until you can try again. The chances of you actually having a claw like this that's completely filled with suffixes is going to be fairly low, but it is something that you need to consider. Once we do just craft attack speed onto our claw, this is more than enough to get you going, and this should honestly be able to carry you through red maps and the majority of content just fine. Whenever you're ready to make an upgrade upgrade, we can actually use the starter claw as a way to upgrade it to make it even better. You might potentially want to go and look for a new claw if it's within your budget with either a higher fracture roll or maybe something you'd recraft with a higher tier essence and a higher tier mod that you're fishing for. Whatever the case is, you would simply just do everything we did in the previous claw to get your prefixes at whatever budget level you're comfortable with. And then instead of crafting attack speed at the end, we are still going to want to get ourselves an open suffix, which we're then going to go to the crafting bench with. Craft prefixes cannot be changed if you do not have all 3 suffixes empty, and then use an Orb Scour on the claw to completely remove all suffixes from the claw. You're then going to just go put can have up to 3 crafted modifiers on it from the crafting bench, and then just finish off the claw by putting on both critical strike chance and attack speed onto it. This is going to be exactly the same thing as your previous claw, except we now get the crit roll, which is going to boost your critical strike chance by quite a bit, giving you an even bigger DPS increase. This should be fairly easy to do, as the only additional cost here is just the cost of the multi-mod mods themselves. So this would be a 5 div upgrade for your claw if you feel like your claw is strong enough to upgrade. And with all that said, that should be all the information you need on the claws that you can make for this build, and you should really look into the cost of crafting it yourself versus buying one from trade. I highly expect them to be worth an unreasonable amount of money. And as you can see, the crafting process for it is very simple, so you shouldn't just waste a bunch of money when you can instead use it as a learning opportunity on how to do a little bit of basic crafting. If you have any questions on anything here, feel free to leave a comment in the comments below, and I'd be more than happy to help you with your craft, or you can simply come by my Twitch and ask me your questions there as well. I hope you kitties enjoyed this video. I hope you have a wonderful 3.25 launch, and if you're going to do this for some profit crafting, I hope you enjoy the profits you're going to make, as these things are going to be quite a lot of money. With that said, I'll see you kitties all in the next video.